Thank you, John. I really appreciate you giving us time to talk about climate crisis and how do you anticipate it. Being one of the top-notch think tanks around, in this in the world, your expertise in anticipating climate crisis, which is becoming more frequent. We would like to know what is the role of think tanks in anticipating climate crisis?
That's a very good question, uh, which in fact put the finger on our think tank, the Foundation 2100. In fact, this foundation was initiated some years ago, but it was a kind of long-term follow-up of an important report which was published in France in 1990. And it was called The Narrative of the Next Century. So it was the narrative of the 21st century when it was published. It was a big study which involved hundreds and hundreds of experts and several years of work, and published as a big book of 600 pages with a lot of image, photography also, and a narrative, just one narrative for the 21st century. And one of the key information was there will be an increase of temperature by 2050 of 2 degrees Celsius, compared to what it was before, just the Industrial Revolution. So, more or less, this is where we are going. The description of the consequence of such increase of temperature was not much developed in the dramatic sense, but it was seen, it was forecast. The problem is, despite it was announced in time, not much, in fact, was prepared by the populations, by the governments to face this situation. The reason is, of course, that sometimes even excellent studies are not published enough, are not known enough. But that might be the case of this study. But sometimes studies are very well done, very well known, published in time, but people don't look at them, don't listen to what is said. The best example in the world is the so-called Meadows report, which was published in 1972 and called The Limits of Growth. And we are facing those limits. The question of climate was not much touched, but the question of natural resource limit for the global economy was clearly spelled out. But we are facing currently exactly the trend which were proposed, but nobody wanted to change the behavior. So the major problem we are facing with mankind and human societies, in fact, is even when they are informed, they don't change their behavior, except when they are really bumping into the wall. And this is precisely the situation where we are now with climate change. So the issue of the role of think tank is first, make clear what are the trends and issues, and secondly, try to facilitate in time the change of behaviors. And that's not easy. That's not easy because you have to convince decision makers first to take the right action, both on the private and public side. So there is a role of persuasion at the level of decision makers. And you have also a role to find a way to reach the population at large, the people at large, for, I would say, facilitating their understanding. And when it's all the effect of climate change are coming up, making them adapting their behaviors for preventing them from catastrophes or adopting the right behaviors, which imply an action of education, sensibilization, action on media, notably, and in using, I would say, convincing image, convincing words with factual insights, scientific backgrounds, and so on and so on. This is what I could say at the level of what your question about the think tank.
So when you publish a report as a researcher or as a research institute, does it reach out to the masses, to the ordinary citizens, or its reach is limited only to other intellectuals in that field, and that creates some problems because the behavior of the masses cannot change unless they get to know those facts and those research conclusions of those research. How do you try to bridge this gap?
It's a very relevant question. In fact, most of the report which are published by the think tank remain into the intellectual circles. I would say the sophisticated intellectual circles, either in academy or in government, sometimes in some industrialist areas. That's the main issue of most of the think tank report. And so far, it's possible sometimes to try to make connection with some medias, either radios, chain, or TV, which are of good quality to reach out a larger population. Sometimes it works. We have some examples in France which illustrate that. The problem is that it remains into, I would say, interested, concerned, and educated population, the segment. The population as a whole is not very much listening to that. But it's not the issue. For instance, the GIEC report, the ICCP, on the climate change. The reports were very well known. Since, I would say, 10 years, now they have been published since 1990, the GIEC report, the Climate Change Commission of the UN. So since 1990, that means 35 years. And in the last 10 years, every year they are producing something which is very well known. Everybody speak about this. Even the poor people, they are able to tell you the GIEC report has said such and such. But it doesn't change a lot. So the question of changing behaviors is very difficult, except when people are in fact facing crisis. And what you can do at this stage, when it's too late in a sense, is to provide them with the good information regarding the way to protect themselves, to go to the right place in time, to avoid taking too much risk here and there. You see, but that's the difficulty.
That's true, but when we talk about changing the behavior, do you think the problem is to change the behavior of how our systems work on governmental level, on business level, or is it more so on the ordinary citizen level too? Which is more of a problem here?
I think if the government level and the decision makers in enterprise, in the business area, I would say all the elite were in fact adopting the right behavior with taking action in time, then that would be much improved. What is important is to create, I would say, an overall condition, institutional conditions with the right information, the right incentives, the right action, whatever they are, investment, infrastructure, or what else, in a way that the population as a whole of the country, the nation as a whole, behave in a better manner. You have good examples, good I would say success story in Nordic countries in Europe. These countries are more equal, environment friendly. They are really able to make in time adjustment for preventing, to a certain extent, bad impact of crisis. They are performing economically, they are performing on a social viewpoint, on the environment and so on. But they are very democratic, they have very strong ethics, they have government which are in the service of the citizens and things like that. So the question is how to organize the society in such a way that they behave collectively in the right manner. And there is a responsibility for the elite of the population. There is a responsibility for the top level who should provide the good examples, who should put in place the laws and the framework, institutional framework, which facilitate this improvement in the ethics, even if it takes time. It might be a matter of long time to change. But if you don't begin now, you will never get any results, even in 10 years or 20 years. You see? So the issue of the responsibility of the top level of the society, of the elite, is fundamental, either for getting the right decision in the right time, or to improve the overall behavior of society in putting in place the right laws, the right institutional framework for democracy, equality, and so on.
This brings me to climate justice issue. And in COP27, Pakistani Prime Minister asked for support from the world to manage climate crisis that we are going through right now, saying that the government of Pakistan does not have sufficient resources to tackle such a gigantic problem which is out of their hand. And COP27 has had a resolution saying that in principle they are going to help out these countries which are vulnerable, which are impacted by climate change, although their contribution to climate pollution was not much. It was less than 1%. Now, this year around itself, we have seen two climate crisis events, one in Pakistan, the other one is in Nigeria, and we are anticipating more frequent climate crisis in different countries. Considering the global economy right now, there is a downturn in the global economy, and the governments are going to be out of money to fund these kind of climate crisis interventions. How hopeful you are about climate justice in terms of providing reparations to climate affected countries by those countries who are more responsible, who have benefited more by polluting the environment and reaping the benefit in terms of goods and commodities historically?
It's a weak question. In a sense, it's true that some countries have, in fact, historically benefited of industrial growth massively, and they have polluted the rest of the world for centuries and for a large responsibility. That's true. At the same time, they were not aware when they have done all that they were going to damage the planet and impact the poorer countries. So the justice is, in a sense, yes, they should repair. At the same time, they were not aware about the damage they were causing. Nevertheless, today, it's true that they have some responsibility for helping the poor countries, which are much impacted by climate change. And there is an issue of this funding, which has been debated and with some advance, not much, in the COP27. So it's important that the global community reach an agreement on enough funding for helping the poor countries impacted by climate change. One difficult issue is that the large countries, not all, but certain number of them, are in economic difficulties. It's not so easy, like a country like France, to really divert some funding because it's in a budgetary and economic situation which is not very well. At the same time, when there is a need to make war or support war, you see that always you find some money here and there. So the reality is that justice for climate justice is a necessity. At the same time, it's difficult for deriving enough money for a number of countries. Whether some gesture of larger countries, big powers like US, China, for instance, would really make a change. It could certainly make a change, it could help the global community to invest also in such funding and create more justice. But we are not so far reaching this point, despite there is a growing feeling of responsibility, including in the population, the lay people. They become aware that they have benefited a lot, but are they ready to take out of their pocket some money to put in the pot for helping the poor? Not yet. That's also an issue. That's the reality. But I repeat, obviously there is a responsibility of the industrialized world. At the same time, this industrialized world has been, up to recent years, not much aware that he was damaging the planet. But action is needed, yeah.
And what should be the role of businesses, and how can governments or international governance community like United Nations, do they have any role to make the businesses pay more taxes, or to make to pay the penalty for damaging the climate, which they have been doing for such a long time? For instance, companies like the fossil fuel companies, Exxon, do they have any responsibility? Can the government make them pay for those damages? Or is there any trend that you're seeing where the governments are trying to make the businesses pay for the damages they cause to the climate?
I think there is a need probably to put some taxes or penalties in relation to bad behaviors, which may happen today, not punishing past behaviors, because it becomes complicated to really, I would say, assess. But for, I would say, damaging behaviors by the business sector, yeah, there is, in my view, no other way than penalties, financial penalties, taxes, and things like that, because this is at the end the type of incentives, quote unquote, that the business people can understand. So for the time being, we don't have in our economic world dominated by the sense of profit other way. We don't have other way for changing behaviors. This is the reality. So my view is that yes. Now the question is how to find the right balance when there are contradicting needs of the population. For instance, now people are looking for gas in view of the world situation with the Ukraine war. You are not going to tax strongly the profit made by the big oil companies in view of these needs, while you know that at the same time it's not good to have the use of this gas and oil and energy and so on for the climate. But this is typically the type of thorny situation where the world is in fact cooked. But definitively, the long-term approach is to tax or make some financial penalties on bad behavioral business in relation to this climate change and energy. But there are, it's also an issue of the good balance. For instance, when you see the big company in France, Total, which has been converted its name in Total Energies. What they are trying to do is to invest in non-carbon energy, like sun, wind, and other things. So they try really to convert. Or if you tax too much the profit they are making from the traditional carbon energy, oil, then you reduce their capacity to change, to convert their trajectory. So this issue of, I would say, long-term balance has to be taken in consideration.
Okay, this brings me to the last question because we are running out of time. You gave us 30 minutes. This is about the role of imagination in designing your research, conducting your research, or picking up a topic to research on. What is the role of research in and the approach of think tanks? How do you use imagination if you do at all?
Very interesting question and very important in terms of methodology for think tank looking at the future. And we have debate, for instance, in France about that among specialists. Before imagination, it's absolutely fundamental to look as much as possible to the fact and to have a rational approach to look at the reality. So getting some factual information, whatever it is, the natural resource in the long term, demographics, and so on. And we should use also the new type of data which can be generated from the big data and all that stuff which now is possible to collect and to analyze, including for understanding the behavior of societies. So there is a need for this collection of facts and some rational thinking about that. And that is the basis. Then after that, when you have all this, you can jump into imagination. Imagine scenarios, imagine possibilities, opportunities, bifurcations, in view of the fact that human societies are not fully determined by their past or by their, I would say, cultural configuration or genetic configuration. So there are always opportunities for new things to come, for events which will change trajectories, for bifurcations. So the question is to figure out credible change of trajectory in human societies. You have to base that both on the understanding of the past, the scenario which have been repeated in the past, the limits, constraints, and so on that you see for the future in view of objective facts, and then leave some room for imagination of change, which seems sufficiently supported by some form of rational arguments about the behavior of societies. Because the story is not completely written for the future. That's the nature of the life, the living organism as human society. So the question is, how do you organize yourself to mix to find the right balance between a factual and rational approach with an open-minded, based on imagination. And how you mix the two is the key for good future studies, which is important. We are working on this new adjustment of this narrative for the 21st century, and we are precisely fighting to find the right balance currently in accumulating facts about natural resource, climate change, demography, and so on. And what about changing behaviors, innovative capacity in organizing societies, technology, and so on? And that's the key thing. So we should leave some space for imagination, but credible.
Thank you so much, John, for taking time out and talking to us about climate crisis and the role of think tanks and the methodology that should be used. What is the role of imagination in it? You also discussed climate justice and the problems that we face in order to provide that climate justice, the role of governments as well as the businesses in trying to alleviate the situation of the people who are going through climate crisis. I appreciate your time very much. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you for your very relevant questions. And it was a pleasure collaborating with you. And my question is just, is it possible to have after that a replay of all the interviews you are going to make? Will be in position to reach out this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations again for this initiative.
Thank you. And we are looking forward to more collaboration, more cooperation with your foundation. And you told me that you are working, and there is probably a lab on imagination that you guys are planning. And I would love to know more about it and maybe participate in it a little bit, because we also have come up with a theory of imagination that I discussed with you in Rabat. And I would like to talk more about it.
For sure. We are working on this narrative for 21st century, and we certainly have the opportunity to collaborate with organizations like you. I would certainly come back to this within the next 6 months or so. So thank you again. A real pleasure.
Thank you very much.